The night was endless on the frozen world. Snow fell in heavy sheets, burying the land in white silence. The wind screamed like hungry spirits, shaking the old wreck where Rivka hid. Her arms wrapped tightly around the small furry creature pressed against her chest. The little pet, Miri, shivered so hard it felt like it might break. Rivka pulled the torn blanket higher, trying to shield them both from the icy air that crept in through cracks. Her lips were pale, her fingers numb. She could feel her heartbeat, slowing each breath harder to take. Her people were gun-swallowed by the storm days ago. She had run with Miri, hoping to find another village. But all she found was snow, wind, and cold death. The wreck she found had no working heater, no food, only a small space to hide from the wind. She pressed her forehead to Miri's soft fur, whispering, "Stay alive, little one, just a bit longer." The darkness outside was heavy, the kind that made her feel like she was already buried. Her thoughts drifted, memories of warm fires, laughter, and her parents' voices faded like mist. She wanted to close her eyes and rest, but she knew if she slept now, she would never wake again. Her breath turned to ice on her lashes. Miri gave a weak sound, and she hugged it tighter. Then, a flicker. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks. A faint, warm light moving through the storm. She blinked, her eyes struggling to focus. The light grew brighter, and a shadow moved within it. A figure walking against the wind. Slow but steady, the snow swirled around it, but it kept coming. Her heart jumped. Was it a villager? A bandit? Or one of the humans her people warned her about? Stories said humans were dangerous, strong, clever, and always wanting something in return. Some called them saviors, others called them thieves. She didn't know which one was true. But right now, all she saw was someone alive. Moving toward her through the deadly storm, the figure stopped a few steps away. Light spilled over their shape, revealing a tall form in thick survival gear. A mask covered the face, with glowing lenses where eyes should be. One hand held a strange weapon. The other, a small heat lamp that glowed like a piece of the sun. The voice that came was muffled, but clear. "Stay still, I'm coming." Rivka froze, unsure whether to hide or reach out. The man stepped into the wreck, crouching beside her. He glanced at Miri, then at her frost-covered face. "You're freezing," he said. His voice low but urgent. "We have to get you warm." His hands were strong but gentle as he wrapped her in a heavy thermal blanket. The heat felt like fire against her skin, making her gasp. Miri gave a small growl, but the man only smiled. Under the mask and offered it a piece of dried food. Rivka's mind screamed questions. Why was a human here? How did he find her? But her voice wouldn't work. She could only watch as he adjusted the blanket and checked her hands for frostbite. Then she heard him say something that felt like a promise. "I've got you. You're not dying tonight." Outside, the storm howled louder, but inside, for the first time in days, Rivka felt a spark of hope. She didn't know who this man was or what he wanted. All she knew was that in a night where death seemed certain, a human had found her, and somehow, everything had changed. The warmth of the blanket felt strange against Rivka's frozen skin. Her body ached as if the heat itself was painful. But she didn't pull away. The human adjusted the thermal wrap, tucking it tight so the cold couldn't creep in again. His mask made it hard to see his face, but his eyes, glowing through the frost-covered lens, swatched her with a calm focus. "You can't stay here," he said, his voice slightly muffled. "The storm will bury this wreck." Before morning, Rivka blinked slowly, her mind still heavy and slow. She had no strength to answer, only a faint nod. Miri, her small pet, stared at the man with wide, frightened eyes, its little body trembling in her arms. The man knelt lower, opening a pouch at his side. From it, he took a tiny packet and offered it to Miri. Inside was a soft, dried strip of food that smelled faintly sweet. Miri sniffed, hesitated, then nibbled it, its shivers easing just a little. "My name's Ethan," the man said quietly. "You?" Rivka hesitated, her voice almost too weak to be heard. "Rivka," he nodded once, as if storing her name in memory. Then, without another word, he slid one arm beneath her knees and the other around her back. She gasped as he lifted her effortlessly, the sudden movement making her dizzy. Miri let out a squeak of protest, but stayed nestled between them. The door to the wreck groaned as he pushed it open. Instantly, the wind screamed in, biting at her face. Ethan stepped into the storm as if he had done it 1,000 times before. Snow whipped around them, making the world a blur of white and shadows. Rivka's head rested against his chest and through the layers of gear. She could hear the steady beat of his heart. It was oddly comforting. She wanted to ask where he was taking her, but her voice was lost in the roar of the wind. Ethan moved. Carefully but quickly, his boots crunching through deep snow. A faint orange glow flickered in the distance like a star trapped on the ground. "That's the shelter," he shouted over the storm. "Just a little more." Rivka closed her eyes, focusing on that warm point of light as her body swayed with each step. The cold still gnawed at her, but she could feel the promise of safety. Ahead, finally, they reached a metal hatch built into the side of a cliff. Ethan set her down gently against the wall, then worked the controls beside the door. The hatch opened with a hiss, releasing a wave of warm air that felt like life itself. He guided her inside, closing the heavy door behind them. The sudden silence was shocking after the roar of the blizzard. Rivka looked around, blinking at the small but well-lit space. There was a heater in the corner, shelves with supplies, and a thick rug covering the cold metal floor. Ethan helped her sit near the heater, removing the frost-crusted blanket and replacing it with another. Her fingers tingled painfully as the warmth sank in. He poured something steaming into a small cup and handed it to her. It smelled strange but inviting. "Drink," he said. "It'll help your body fight the cold." She took a small sip. The taste was bitter at first, then warm all the way to her chest. Her shivers began to ease. How did you find me?" she asked softly. Ethan leaned back, resting his weapon against the wall. "I was scanning the storm for heat signatures," he explained. "Almost nothing out there but the wind. Then I saw a faint pulse. That was your pet's heartbeat." Rivka stared at him, surprised he had come into the blizzard for her. "For them. Why?" she whispered before she could stop herself. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "Because no one should die alone out there," he said simply. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Her people had always told her that humans acted only for themselves. Yet here he was, risking his life to save someone he had never met. She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself and glanced at Miri, who was now curled up peacefully beside the heater. Maybe the stories were wrong, or maybe this human was different. The storm still raged outside, but in the shelter, Rivka felt something she hadn't felt in days. Hope. And as she sat there, watching the human named Ethan move quietly around the room, she wondered what else might change before this night was over. The warmth inside the shelter slowly began to fight the ice in Rivka's bones. Her numb fingers twitched as blood returned to them, sending sharp stings through her skin. Miri was curled up on a folded blanket beside the heater, eyes half closed. In comfort, Ethan moved with quiet efficiency, hanging up his frost-covered coat and gloves to dry. The small room was a mix of human and alien technology, metal walls lined with strange panels, a humming heater, and shelves stacked with both canned food and dried alien roots. A bedroll lay neatly in one corner, and above it, a small light flickered softly. For the first time in days, Rivka felt a fragile sense of safety. Still, her mind wouldn't rest. "Where is this place?" she asked, her voice raspy. Ethan looked over from where he was checking a small device. "It's an emergency shelter," he replied. "I built it into the cliff when my ship crashed. Keeps me alive during storms like this." Rivka stared at him, surprised. "You've been living here alone?" He gave a small shrug. "For almost a year now. A year alone." In this frozen wasteland, she couldn't imagine it. Her people would never survive this long without a community, but this human seemed to endure it as if it were just another challenge. She sipped from the cup he had given her earlier, feeling warmth spread through her stomach. "You didn't have to save me," she said quietly. Ethan glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said simply, "but I wanted to." Those words stayed in her mind. She had grown up believing humans were selfish. Yet here was one who had walked into a killing storm for someone he didn't know. Her gaze dropped to Miri, who was now fast asleep, safe and warm. For that alone, she was grateful. Ethan knelt by the shelves, pulling out a packet of food. It was a mix of dried meat and bread, simple but filling. He placed it in front of her. "Eat slowly. Your stomach needs time to adjust." Rivka hesitated, then took a small bite. The taste was plain, but after days of hunger, it felt like a feast. "You tracked me because of Miri's heartbeat," she said after a while. "How did you even detect something so small?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I've modified my scanner. It can pick up faint life signs, even in heavy storms." She looked at him curiously. "You're not just a survivor. You're a builder." "Have to be," he replied. "On a planet like this, if you can't make or fix things, you die." The heater hummed softly, wrapping the room in a gentle warmth. Rivka leaned back against the wall, exhaustion tugging at her. But her eyes kept going to the human. He moved with a quiet strength, his every action careful, as if he was used to protecting fragile things. Her thoughts drifted to the night her village fell. The sudden attack, the screams, the snow-stained red, running with Miri in her arms. Hearing her mother's last words, "Keep her safe," her chest tightened and she swallowed hard. Pushing the memory away, Ethan noticed her silence. "You've been through a lot," he said softly. "If you want to tell me, I'll listen. If not, that's fine too." She hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "Raiders came, burned everything, took what they wanted. I ran because I couldn't fight them." Her voice cracked. "I thought maybe I'd find others, but all I found was snow." Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't try to comfort her with empty words. Instead, he sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "You survived," he said finally. "That's more than most could have done." Rivka looked at him, wondering why his words felt heavier than they should. Maybe because he spoke them like someone who had lost his own people too. She didn't ask about his past somehow. She knew he'd tell her when he was ready. The wind outside howled, but here, in this little pocket of warmth and light, Rivka felt the first fragile threads of trust forming. And though the storm might last for days, she realized she didn't fear it anymore, not while Ethan was here. The storm outside had no intention of stopping. Snow beat against the metal walls of the shelter in steady, angry waves inside. The heater hummed softly, wrapping the space in a cocoon of warmth. Rivka sat near it, her knees drawn close. Miri curled tightly in her lap. Ethan sat across from her, leaning against the wall with his gear laid out beside him. For a while, they spoke little. The only sound between them, the wind's distant howl. Rivka stared at the flickering heater light, her mind replaying memories she wished she could bury. She didn't want to remember the raiders' faces, the fire, the cold rush of fear, but the warmth and quiet made the thoughts slip in. Uninvited, she broke the silence first. Her voice quiet. "My people. They never trusted humans," she said slowly. "Some said you were dangerous. Others said you were clever but unfeeling." Her eyes moved to him, searching his face. "I don't know which is true." Ethan didn't look offended, only curious. "What do you think now?" he asked. Rivka hesitated. "I think. Maybe it depends on the human." Her fingers brushed Miri's fur as she continued. "When the raiders came, they weren't human, they were from a rival clan," she said, her voice shaking. "They took food, tools, even the young. Burned the rest," her gaze lowered. "I tried to hide with my parents, but they told me to run, to take Miri and go. I never saw them again." She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I kept walking, thinking I'd find someone who'd take me in, but every door stayed shut. Every fire I saw was one I couldn't approach." Ethan's hands rested loosely on his knees. "You survived on your own through this kind of cold. For days?" he asked quietly. Rivka nodded. "Only because Miri's warmth kept me from freezing completely." Her gaze softened as she stroked the little creature. "She's all I have left." For a moment, silence returned. Ethan's eyes held a weight she hadn't noticed before. Finally, he spoke, his tone low. "I know what it's like." Rivka looked up. "Surprised, my crew." He began. "We were hauling supplies through this sector when a micrometeor storm hit. Tore the hull apart." He stared at the floor as if seeing the moment all over again. "Half of us were gone in seconds. The rest drifted off in escape. Pods scattered to places I couldn't reach." He let out a breath. "I landed here, wasn't supposed to. But it was that, or burn up in the atmosphere." Rivka's eyes softened. "How long ago?" "A year," Ethan replied. "A year of waiting for rescue that never came." The thought of being alone for that long made her chest ache. Yet here he was, still alive, still strong, still willing to save a stranger. Maybe it wasn't just strength keeping him alive, maybe it was stubbornness, or something deeper. She glanced toward the wall where his weapon rested. "You're armed," she said cautiously. "Were you afraid I might be dangerous?" He shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "No. The weapon's for what lives out there," he said, jerking his chin toward the storm. "This planet has predators that hunt the heat of a living body. And they're clever enough to find shelter doors." The thought made Rivka's skin prickle. She had heard of such creatures, but never seen one. Wasn't sure she wanted to. Still, she noticed the way Ethan kept glancing toward the door, as if listening for something beyond the wind. "You risked a lot coming for me," she said quietly. Ethan's eyes met hers, steady and unshaken. "Some risks are worth it," he said simply, and for a brief moment, she felt her chest tighten, not from fear, but from something she couldn't name. The heater crackled softly, casting a gentle glow over the small room outside. The blizzard howled inside. Two survivors sat across from each other, both carrying wounds the cold couldn't touch, and though neither would say it out loud yet, both knew the storm outside wasn't the only one they were facing. The storm had been raging for hours. The steady roar outside was almost a comfort now, like a wall keeping the outside world away. Rivka sat near the heater, Miri resting in her lap, her eyes half closed in the warmth. Ethan was sitting at the small table in the corner, repairing a cracked piece of equipment, his hands moving with steady focus. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that made Rivka's skin crawl. The wind was still there, but something underneath it had changed. A faint vibration in the floor, so slight she wondered if she imagined it. She glanced toward Ethan, but he was still working. Then she heard its soft, muffled thuds coming from somewhere outside the shelter. Her body stiffened. "What is that?" she whispered. Ethan froze mid-movement, his head tilted slightly. Listening, the sound came again. Closer this time, a slow, heavy step, followed by a scraping noise. His jaw tightened. "They've found us, Ka," he said quietly, almost to himself. Rivka's pulse quickened. "They?" Ethan stood and reached for his weapon, a sleek black rifle with a faint blue glow along its side. "Snowstalkers," he said, checking the charge. They hunt heat. They can smell it through metal walls. Rivka's grip tightened on Miri. She had heard the story's creatures the size of two men, with fur like ice and claws sharp enough to tear through stone. She had never seen one and never wanted to, but from the sound of the slow, deliberate movements outside, she knew they were real. Ethan moved to the door and activated a small monitor panel. A blurry thermal image appeared, a large, shifting shape moving outside the shelter. Its body was cold on the outside, but burning with heat on the inside. Another shape appeared behind it, then another. "They're hunting in a pack," Ethan muttered. "We've got maybe minutes before they test the walls." Rivka's heart pounded. "What do we do?" Ethan glanced at her, his voice firm but calm. "You stay here, keep Miri quiet, and don't open that door no matter what happens." She wanted to argue, to say she could help, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't arrogance. It was experience. This was someone who had faced danger like this before. The thuds grew louder, now accompanied by a deep, guttural growl. The walls shuddered as something heavy slammed against them. Miri let out a frightened squeak, and Rivka quickly covered its head with the blanket. Ethan moved to the narrow window slit on the sidewall, aiming his weapon through it, a shadow. Passed in front of the glass-white fur, glistening with frost and a flash of teeth, he fired, the weapon releasing a sharp burst of blue light. The growl turned into a piercing screech, followed by frantic movement outside. For a moment, Rivka thought it was over. Then the scratching started, long, slow claws scraping against the metal door. The sound was worse than the howling wind. It was the sound of something patient, something testing for weakness. Ethan cursed under his breath, adjusting the rifle settings. "They're not leaving without a fight," he said. A sudden loud bang made Rivka jump. The sidewall dented inward, snow spilling from the impact. Ethan fired again, the weapon humming with each shot, but more shapes appeared on the thermal monitor. "Too many. Stay low," he shouted, moving to block the weak corner of the shelter. Rivka crouched, holding Miri close, her heart racing. She felt useless, trapped. She wanted to help, but didn't know how. Then she remembered the emergency flare Ethan had given her. Earlier, when they first arrived, she pulled it from her pocket, gripping it tightly. If these creatures hunted heat, maybe the flare could distract them. When the next slam shook the shelter, Rivka yanked the hatch on the far wall. Tossing the flare out into the snow, the sudden burst of bright heat lit up the darkness. A chorus of growls erupted outside as the shapes on the monitor turned toward it. Ethan glanced at her, surprise flashing in his eyes before he gave a sharp nod. "Good thinking," he said, firing at the distracted creatures, driving them further from the shelter for a tense few minutes. The sounds outside grew fainter until only the storm remained. Ethan lowered his weapon slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. He turned to Rivka, his expression serious, but softer than before. "You just saved us a lot of trouble," he said. Rivka exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. And though the danger wasn't gone forever, she felt something stronger than fear now. A strange, growing trust in the human who had risked his life to protect her. The brief silence after the snowstalkers left was heavy. Rivka sat on the floor, still holding Miri close, her breath uneven. Ethan moved to check the monitor again, his eyes scanning for any sign of heat outside. "They're not gone," he said after a moment. "They're just regrouping." Her stomach tightened. "How many?" Ethan tapped the side of the screen, zooming in. 4. "Maybe 5 now," he answered, "and they're smarter when they come back." The thought sent a shiver through Rivka. She had never fought a predator like this. The raiders had been terrifying. But at least they could be reasoned with. These creatures wanted only one thing: to feed. Ethan moved quickly, setting up 2 small metal devices by the door. "What's that?" she asked. "Shock mines," he replied. "If they push through, It'll buy us a few seconds." He glanced at her. "I'll need your help this time." Rivka blinked in surprise. "You? Trust me to fight?" Ethan gave a faint smile. "You've already proven you think fast under pressure. Just follow my lead." Before she could answer, the first impact hit. The metal door groaned, dust shaking loose from the ceiling. Miri let out a frightened hiss. The second hit was harder. Bending the steel slightly inward, Ethan raised his rifle. "They're testing the weak spots," he muttered. "Get ready." The third slam came with a tearing sound. A claw punched through the wall just above the floor. Ethan fired instantly. Blue energy bursting through the opening. A high-pitched shriek filled the air, followed by more furious growls. Rivka grabbed a long metal rod from the corner one of Ethan's spare tools and held it tight. Her hands shaking, then the door burst open. The shock mines exploded in a flash of light and sound, stunning the first two snowstalkers. Ethan shot one clean through the chest, its body falling backward into the snow. The second recovered faster. Leaping inside with jaws wide, Rivka reacted without thinking. She swung the rod with all her strength, striking its head. The creature staggered, giving Ethan a clear shot to finish it. But more shadows moved outside, their glowing eyes like cold fire in the darkness. "They're coming in." Ethan shouted. Two more predators forced their way through the doorway, their massive frames blocking out the storm behind them. The first lunged at Ethan, who rolled to the side and fired upward into its belly. The second charged straight for Rivka. She froze for a heartbeat, then remembered the flare trick. She grabbed one from Ethan's gear belt and lit it. The bright heat startled the creature, making it hesitate. Ethan turned, took aim, and brought it down. For a moment, the only sounds were the crackle of the flare and the howling wind outside. Then came a deep, echoing roar, much louder than the others. Rivka's blood ran cold. "That's the Alpha," Ethan said grimly, "and it's angry." The ground seemed to tremble as the largest snowstalker appeared in the doorway. Its fur shimmered like silver ice, its teeth long and jagged. It stepped inside slowly, its gaze locked on them. Ethan adjusted his rifle, switching to maximum power. "This one's mine," he said. The Alpha moved with terrifying speed. Ethan fired, but the creature twisted. The shot grazing its side, it slammed into him. Knocking the rifle away, Rivka screamed his name. Without thinking, she grabbed the metal rod again and swung hard at the creature's back. It roared, spinning toward her. But Ethan recovered. Grabbing a blade from his belt, he drove it deep into the snowstalker's neck. The beast thrashed violently before collapsing with a heavy thud. Silence filled the shelter, broken only by their ragged breathing. Ethan stood still for a moment, then slowly pulled the blade free. Blood steamed on the cold floor. Rivka lowered the rod, her hands aching from the grip. Miri peeked out from the blanket, eyes wide but safe. Ethan turned to her, his face pale but calm. "You fought well," he said. "Better than I expected." Rivka met his gaze. Feeling the rush of adrenaline fade, "I wasn't going to let you fight alone," she replied, for the first time. Ethan's expression softened into something warmer. It's a kind of look that said he no longer saw her as just someone he had rescued. Now, she was his partner in survival. The shelter was quiet again. The heater hummed softly, the air thick with the faint smell of smoke and melted snow. The bodies of the snowstalkers lay half buried in the drift outside the broken doorway, their white fur blending with the storm. Rivka sat against the wall, her chest rising and falling in slow, tired breaths. Miri curled in her lap, warm and alive. Ethan moved carefully, sealing the damaged parts of the door with metal panels from the supply shelves. His movements were steady, as if the fight hadn't shaken him, but Rivka could see the stiffness in his shoulders, the way he winced when he leaned down. "You're hurt," she said quietly. He shook his head. Nothing that will stop me. The storm outside had lost some of its roar. The wind was softer now, almost cautious. Ethan checked the monitor, scanning the horizon. "They're gone," he said, finally. "No. The pack won't come back, not after losing the Alpha." Rivka let out a slow breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The danger had passed, but the weight of the last few hours still pressed heavy on her. She had been ready to die in the wreck where he found her. Now she was alive, warm, and safe because of him. Ethan sat down across from her, his rifle resting. Beside him, "You fought well," he said again, his tone serious. "Most people freeze up in their first real fight." Rivka looked down, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I think I only moved because I didn't want Miri to be alone." Ethan chuckled softly. "That's as good a reason as any." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind fade. The first light of morning began to seep in through the narrow window. It was weak, pale, but it was light, the first they had seen in what felt like forever. Rivka shifted, feeling the warmth on her face. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan glanced at the window, then at her. "You know? The storm won't last much longer," he said, "when it clears. We can head to a safer place. There's a ridge east of here that's easier to defend." Rivka hesitated. "You mean, you want me to go with you?" His gaze was steady. "I didn't pull you out of that wreck just to leave you alone again." The words warmed her more than the heater ever could. For so long, she had been drifting without a place, without a person she could trust. And now, in the middle of this frozen wasteland, someone had not only saved her life, but wanted her to stay. She tightened her hold on Miri. Feeling the little creature's steady breathing, "We'll go," she said softly. "All of us," Ethan gave a small nod, as if it was already decided. He began packing supplies into a weatherproof bag: food, water, ammunition, extra blankets. Rivka helped, folding what she could and making sure Miri had a secure pouch inside her coat. The work felt strange, but good. It wasn't just survival anymore, was preparing for something ahead. When they were ready, Ethan opened the repaired hatch. The cold rushed in, but it no longer felt like a threat outside. The world was still covered in endless snow, but the sky was lighter. Shadows stretched long across the white, and the air held a clean, crisp scent. Rivka stepped out beside him, her boots sinking into the soft powder. She looked back once at the shelter that had kept them alive through the night. It felt like leaving behind a chapter of fear and stepping into something unknown but possible. Ethan adjusted his gear and looked toward the rising light. "It's a long walk," he said. "But we'll make it." She met his eyes, the corners of her mouth lifting. "With you here, I believe that." They began to walk. Their footprints, the only marks on the untouched snow. The wind whispered softly now, carrying no threat. And though the cold still clung to the air, Rivka felt a quiet warmth inside her. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was the start of a new life for the first time since the storm began. She believed that maybe, just maybe, this frozen world could hold something worth staying for.